Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I think there's some functions going on. A few people may come in and join us as we go on. But thank you so much for being here and welcome. I want to spend some time going over the long-range plan. Also want to make sure everybody understands that this plan is not something that was just created. This has been being worked on really since 2012. It's been an ongoing process, and we've continued working on it this year as church council. And so very excited about walking you through this and letting you see where we've been and where we're going. So there will be questions at the end. We're going to throw a lot of information at you, but don't worry, there's going to be plenty of time to ask questions at the end. And look forward to seeing what you have to say. Gary Hyman's going to kick us off. Gary was the church council chair for the 3 years before I took over. And he can kind of walk you through a little bit of history that came along as we went into this plan.
As Jim mentioned, the dates on it were 2013 to 2023, so a little bit behind, a little bit ahead. How many of you actually were here in 2013? Were members here and active? A lot of you, and a couple new ones. All of you who were here in 2013, let me just remind you of a few things that were going on right before 2013. So we had a change with our pastor, had a little issue that got a lot of publicity, and we had to make a change. And along came this new guy, this young guy, handpicked out of somewhere in the Midlands, who was just on vacation trying to visit with his family, had all his phone and everything turned off for one of the few times he's done that, and came back, turned it on, and it almost blew up because someone, Bishop, wanted him to move and come to this place called Advent. I had just been, as Jim mentioned, was fortunate enough to also have been nominated and voted on as the chairman of the council. So a lot going on. But the one thing we realized very quickly, Michael wasn't intent on coming up here and doing it Michael's way. Michael was wise enough to come in and try to learn a little bit about us first. So he spent some time around us, a few months, and then we called the council together in April of that year. And we had an intensive couple sessions to where this plan started to be sketched out. So there's a couple basic things though, right? So our mission, make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformational world. And I tell everybody this. In 2008, we did it too. We had 30 people. We went to Clemson. We spent a weekend together. Then we spent another time, and we developed a strategic plan. Susan was with us. It was pretty interesting. And we got this mission statement. And I thought we were so smart. It's the greatest mission statement. Then I figured out it's actually the mission statement for the entire Methodist Church. So we didn't come up with it. But more importantly, in the 2013 plan and up to today and going forward, we started living out that mission. It's one thing to have a statement. It's another to actually do it. So it wasn't actually something we came up with. In fact, it was the last thing Jesus said to his disciples. Go, do, find people, tell them about me, and bring them into our family. And so we've been living that out, and I'm really excited about that. After a couple of these sessions, though, I will show you, I was at Lou's having lunch after church one Sunday. It had been a little bit of a challenging time, and this fortune came to me. And now I have it on my desk, but I took a picture of it. A ship at harbor is safe, but that's not why they make ships. So some of the things we've been doing since 2013, and some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about doing, is not safe. It's not quiet. It's not comfortable, because it requires change. And for some reason, that's just not something that a lot of us catch on with. Keep this in mind as we go through, and then some of the things we'll talk about in the end. Safety is not one of the things we spend a lot of time worried about. We did start talking about our mission is fishing. See, we didn't talk about that before 2013. Our mission is fishing, but I also kind of coined this thing about fishing, feeding, and following, because it is important that we go out there. And we did a study, right? I started talking to you about 80-something thousand people that live within a 5-mile radius of this church. A significant portion of those, fortunately, said they knew of Jesus Christ, but not a lot of them were active in their faith. And more unfortunately, there's a significant percentage of that population that didn't know Jesus Christ as their Savior. So we knew automatically within walking distance of this church, we had some really good work that could be done. But once you invite people in and they come in, then what do we do with these people? And that's where we kind of coined this thing about feeding. Our spirits need to be fed. And then once we head down that path, well, it's time to follow. And Jesus never stood still. Jesus went and did. So we need to be doing that as well. So when it comes to fishing, we said we wanted, first of all, you have to develop an attitude of invitation. It's one thing to come on Sunday and hear a good sermon and hear some good music and leave and go back out into the world. But we did want those 20 to 30,000 people out there who weren't active just right down the road to come in here and do it with us. We also talked about making great first impressions. So it's not coincidence that Michael or Laura Allen or whoever's up here every Sunday says there's going to be somebody in this church you don't know. They're a guest. Let's meet each other. Let's say hello to each other and make them feel welcome. That's intentional because we know that happens here. So that's one of the small things we start doing. And then we got to reach out. We have some great events here. We had them long ago. They started, But we said, how can we get those events out and get them out in the community? So there was a plan to do that as well. We started looking at how we looked in the community, and our website wasn't the greatest. So we started redoing that. We started looking at all of our communications, and we've done some amazing things on those, and a lot of that was a hire, and Roxanne's done some wonderful stuff. But Michael has some amazing talent too, and videoing and things like that. So we've started doing some pretty new things in those times. And then lastly, the staff led us. They said, what are the things we do now? What are our big events? And why can't we take those events out into the community? So that's when our Easter egg hunt became more than just something for people to do in Advent. We're getting ready to have the trunk or treat. It's now a community event. So we took our 4 major events and we made those community events. And hundreds of people came to our campus who would not ordinarily have come. And they met us. And it's a great fishing exercise. What do we do for our folks in-house? How do we become this thing called disciples to transform the world? And we started looking at that. So we started implementing a plan on the disciples' path. What is the disciples' path? And I remember some people didn't want to do this. So, well, I can't really define it. It's just one of the things you know. And I'm like, no. You can define it. You can at least start. And we can talk about it. So what do disciples do that others don't? Well, first of all, they spend some time in the Word. They spend some time in prayer. And now, if you've been in a disciple path class, over 7 weeks, there's a lot of things we do. We didn't have that class then. We have that class now. And we got to continually motivate our people not to just take that one class and check it off and say, I'm now a disciple. You start hearing about growth happens in groups. We start talking about groups. Groups are, we're not really concerned if you're a member of the church, but we're really concerned if you're not a member of a group, because that's where growth, that's where discipleship really happens. And that's when we started talking about those kind of things. The disciple path was put out. In fact, not only just for new members as you know it now, but remember when we first put it out, we wanted everybody in the church to go through the class. And over 350 people did go through the 7-week class. And it was a really neat start. And then, as you now know, when you go through the new member, want to be a new member process, then that's the course that we use. And so everybody that becomes a member actually goes through it. It's really neat. I get to do the class on prayer and Bible study. And so I get to see all the new folks. And it's so exciting to hear their stories of how they came to us. And some can nail it real quickly, but most of them will talk about a path that got them here to visit or whatever, but then there's something just about Advent that felt right? So we can all relate to that. There's just something about Advent that feels right at home and gets us excited about here. And it's neat to see those usually 30 to 40 to 50 people in those classes who we do. And then after we've become disciples, we've read the book, we've done the prayers, we've attended the services, we've gone to our small group. It's nothing without deed, right? Faith without deed is no faith at all. Action. So we got to go out and do. Now the good news about Advent is we've been doing since there were 17 people in the clubhouse. That is really just part of our DNA. We've always done. But we took some of those things and we notched them up, right? So March Mission Madness used to be a thing. We just got a few people around, went out and did some stuff, 20, 30, 40 people. Jimmy, when you were the missions chair, how many did we have? 400 people came here in this exact place because it was a gym at the time. Someone up there took a picture of us and we had to get real wide. And 400 people went out and in a half a day made some significant changes to Greenville County and some really great places and got to know the community. That was just one thing. Our young pastor, who we figured out wasn't as young as he looked, because he came up with this great idea that we should give away our December offering. And our financial people were like, what? No, that's our biggest offering. That's not safe. Well, we're not meant to be safe, right? And you know what happened, right? Because he didn't even set a goal. We're just give half, right? Remember the story? Take half of what you spend, put it away, spend the other half, because your kids are going to die if you tell them you're not going to spend anything. So give half. And that night, I waited for the text to hear what the number was going to be, and it was late. In fact, early the next morning when we learned it was over $250,000. I mean, amazing, right? Not only that, but we took that money we got with Homes of Hope and exponentially took that money to where there's now homes where people who are homeless trying to transition out of that have a place to live, and there's going to be more of them. Just because someone had the idea to do that with our offering. It was amazing. And then what else can we do? So you're going to hear at the end of this some stuff that what is needed in this community we call ours. From 2013, 2014, when we started walking through this and we started getting our numbers and we started looking, you don't have to run down to Triune to make a difference around here. You don't have to fly off to a foreign country. You can just walk. In walking distance of this church, there are significant needs. There are significant things that we can make a major impact in our community. We knew that then, and it became real. So, council walked out there, they said, we've got 5 things we're going to do. What's important now? We call them wins. What are the 5 wins? And there they are behind me. First of all, some of you will remember, our sanctuary was full. In fact, people would come to visit us and they'd have to leave because they could not get in the door. There was no room for them. We were whipping out chairs all over the place and sitting in every crevice. We needed space. So space was an issue. Leadership was a little bit of an issue. At council, I would look and there'd be 50 to 60 people in a room, and there'd be committees of this and committees of that, and we'd try to make decisions. It's almost impossible. And plus, we'd spend 2-3 hours in there, and we'd be talking about colors of carpet and where monitors were hung and things like that. The straw broke the camel's back. Is that what it says? We had a committee that went out and tried to find space solutions, and they came back and they had beautiful drawings. They showed us expansion to this, expansion to that, money this, money that, and then they said, oh, by the way, we have one question. How many people will come to Advent in the next 3 years? And it was silence, because nobody was charged to look long term. We were all just doing today's business and worried about today's problems. And we figured we got a problem. It's okay when you're 17 people, 52 people, 200 people, but when you're 700 people and you've got the place we've got, somebody's got to be looking down the road. And so we changed our leadership structure. We had to talk about that. And then Disciples Path, we talked about the children's ministry. It's the lifeblood of a church, right? The young families come, the kids come, they want a program. So we had to look at that, and then our youth program. It's amazing, and it's one of our most important things. So what do we do? Well, we're doing it now. Now, I didn't plan the fire. That wasn't the committee's job. But, this way about God working. After Thursday night's meeting, we were able to walk through there, and Randall's not here, so we can say we did it. It's incredible. It's incredible. We envisioned this space where people, when they left the service, they'd be able to connect with people and talk with people. Because before, our narthex wasn't as big as that stage, and the only way you could stay and talk to somebody if the weather was nice and you could go outside. Because people were moving and you had to get out of the way. We are now going to have this amazing space where there'll be no pressure for you to go anywhere. And now everybody tries to find their church on the internet, and then when they come to us, they're not visiting for the first time. They want confirmation that what they saw on that website was real. And so we're going to really be able to spend time with folks who visit us out in that huge connection space. It's going to be incredible. Plus, we're going to have a lot more seats. So it's going to be great. It's beautiful space. It's going to be neat. The structure, we now have a formalized leadership group. They meet once a month. Their goal is long-term. So they're on the long-term plan, visioning, moving forward, and the council is here working on the today and now, as they always have. If you've been in the children's room, building, you've seen our education space, you've seen the reservation. You will see, too, on our website that we're now looking for a coordinator with volunteers for the children. You saw children singing. Those are all things that weren't happening. That they said, we need those things to happen. And they're moving fast on that. And the children, and with the group, Jim will tell you about some work they've done, too, to try to improve the children's, the youth program. So that's a really quick memory lane 2013 thing. But it's just exciting because we weren't doing a lot of things that we take for granted now. It's happened pretty quickly. And, we kind of stir it up a little bit. And we're going to keep stirring up. And I'll let Jim and Dave and Laura Allen tell you about the rest of it. Thank you.
Okay, so I had the blessing of being on church council for 15 and 16. And so all these long range plans, were somewhat familiar to me and I understood the process. But before I came in as church council chair, I spent a lot of time with Gary and with Michael going through these and where we would need to go and how we keep this plan going. And so at the first leadership meeting when I was chair of church council, I talked about how we were going to get together and we were going to have these analysis and we were going to move this thing forward. That was on February 7th. On the morning of February 8th, there was a little fire. And so really last year we spent a great deal of time coordinating this space and doing a lot of the things that needed to be done. At the same time, Advent remained totally outward. Work was being done the next morning for Backpack Blessings. It was just a beautiful thing to watch. But leadership and church council spent a lot of time working on those needs to make sure we kept going and had our worship space. So in the beginning of this year, I guess, we started with taking a look at SWOT analysis. And we did them with church council, with children's ministry, and with the youth. The other thing we were looking for and finally found was some benchmarking, some analysis from other churches that could look at some categories, and we'll look at some of these in a minute, and give us a feel as to where we are and how we're doing, to let us know if we need some growth in certain areas. So those were two big priorities. I'll go through with you quickly what came out. With the church council, the very number one priority was adult discipleship, connections, and small groups, because growth happens in groups, right? And you've seen we are in the process of looking for that adult discipleship person right now. The next thing was kids, and that is our fastest growing demographic in this area. So we have to be ready for them, and we have to have it properly staffed and ready to go. And as Gary mentioned, we've got the volunteer coordinator position coming on too. The youth program is a shining star, but it is a critical piece, and we must keep our focus on that space and engagement for all there. And then our technology. How can we use the website, streaming, those things to help reach beyond these walls and to more people? So that's what came out of the church council one. Then with the student ministry, it was communications, improving and building on the communications in all aspects of the program. There were life groups. We've got excellent life groups, but there's still more room for growth there and improving those. Sunday school is a growth opportunity too for the youth, so keep focused on that. From the kids' SWOT analysis, the renovating space, making sure we made a great first impression, utilizing all of that as well as we can. Staffing addition that we've talked about, volunteer coordinators, the music support. And Chris has done a wonderful job as he came in. This was a big part of what he was asked to take on. And you saw 11:15 this morning, the kids were singing. And he's got a great philosophy. It brings them in Wednesday night. I was here for some meetings Wednesday night, and they were down here. It was awesome. But they just roll through in Sunday mornings, and then they're ready to go, and they all get familiar with it. So it's been a huge piece there. Curriculum was adjusted a little bit to a different one that has a little more use of Bibles, which is good and effective. And then worship and Sunday school times. There's a lot of emphasis right now on that 11:15 hour for kids' Sunday school, which we've added and we're really trying to grow. And you'll see some numbers here in a little bit that will show that we're having some growth there. Okay, you'll see them right now. These are the benchmarks that we were talking about. And these are updated, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, but the attendance growth, last time we looked at this, was flat. It is actually now up 1.7 is kind of the benchmark. And let me tell you, this is a group of churches that range from 3,000 members to 100 members, with the average size being about 650, which is just about right for us because we're about 700. So it gives us kind of a good baseline to look at where we are. In small groups, we do not have a number on that yet. That's why the adult discipleship person will be able to get their hands on that. Our giving per capita, we're in an affluent area. We know that. And our giving per capita is strong. You got some staffing numbers that show kind of where we are. Invitees becomes an opportunity. should have one invitee for 3 first time for every 5 attendees, okay? And that number based on our attendance should be 450, but we are at 243. So we can be more invitational, and we need to work on that. Youth attendance is better than the benchmark. However, it's a great source of strength and needs to be continually focused on. Children ministry is below the benchmark, but last time we did this and we looked at it, the children's number was 65, not 85. So we're seeing some positive growth on that side, which is exciting. All right, so emphasis on keep making disciples. Forming faith and engaging people in church and in small groups, and enhancing the children's ministry, focused on making disciples from children through adults. It's where we need to be focused. Stress fishing, be more invitational. We've done the sermon series about the unchurched or the dechurched. And the new space. We want to be prepared to make as big a splash as we can. This is a huge fishing opportunity for us. This community grieved with us, and I think they'll like to celebrate with us. And it'll be an opportunity to get people in that might find this as their home, and that would be excellent. There is a subcommittee working on kind of the parameters of what's going to be going on around that opening, and while everything's not decided firmly yet, but it is going to be worship, fellowship, and service. Advent was in service when the fire happened, and will be in service coming out of the fire too. So I think that's going to be great. Get more people moving down the Disciples Path class. We have to keep focused on growth happening in groups. Again, building disciples for life, from children to adults. And then, and how does our online support play into this? And what are other opportunities regarding technology? So we got to develop a 5 Forks plan as well, but we need to be focused intentionally here. So that comes 2 pieces. One is to seed a church in our dynamic growth market. It's booming down here, and we have an opportunity. The other thing is to find out exactly what the needs are in this community. And a group from this church has done some wonderful work on that, and we'll be talking about that in just a minute. But I'm going to turn it over to Dave Stafford, who's been on Satellite Committee from the beginning, and let him take it from there.
Thank you, Jim. I'm Dave, and I'm going to say a few words, but Laura Allen kind of did everything this morning. You heard about Laura Allen. Everybody heard Laura Allen's sermon this morning? What did she tell us to do? Be bold. Be bold. And that's what this is all about. So while Gary talked about what happened, in the past in 2013, and Jim was talking about the transition, the future, in parallel, back in 2016, there was a few of us got together and started talking about what would it mean to be bold beyond this sanctuary, this place that's successful, that has blessed so many people. What does it mean to be bold and go beyond that? And so a group of us started meeting and talking about that. But before I talk about the timeline, let's talk about what is a multi-site. So multi-site, I'm yawning too today. I'm really tired, so I'm yawning. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's cold. But multi-site's pretty simple. It's really just, it's the same church. It's the same DNA. It's Advent. But it's one church, 4 services, 2 locations. All right? And in 2020, the second location will start. And that's pretty much what we're talking about. It's the same DNA, the same sermon series, this contemporary worship music, same focus on youth, same focus on children, but in a different location. So a group of us started to get together in 2016 with Laura Allen and Michael and Gary and myself and Debbie Cartman and Sarah Kelly. And we began to talk about what it meant to be multi-site. We began to learn. We benchmarked. We went and learned a lot from churches here in the upstate, like Grace Church. Went to St. Andrews by the Sea down Hilton Head in Bluffton and learned how they had been successful with their approach to multi-site. And then as Jim referenced earlier, we were making progress, and in February of 2017 happened. And we kind of took our foot off the accelerator a little bit because the church needed time to regroup, rethink, grieve, and come back out with the great plans that we see. But now we've gotten back going again. And this summer we met, you'll see that Laura Allen and I met with the principal of Rudolph Gordon School. It is elementary, it's K4 to 8th grade, so it's elementary and middle school. Has anyone seen the school down there? You know what I'm talking about? Some of you know where it is. It's about 6 miles south of here down Scuffletown Road. That school will soon have 1,500 students in it. And as you know, this district's also planning a high school out that way as well to talk about the growth. So very successful meeting. Jackie Parker was very open to the idea of working with us as a location to start our adventures of multi-site, okay, and holding our services there. And Laura Allen began to work with them. We had lunch, we had a meal for the staff and the teachers when they came back at the first of the year. And Laura Allen's been working with them, and I think we have 4 members who actually work there at that school as well. So we're beginning to build that relationship, and our intention is to grow that relationship and to begin to hold community-type events in 2019, 2020, and then start regular worship, we hope, in 2020. That'd be the goal, is sometime in 2020, when we're right and we have enough people involved, we'll start regular weekly worship at that school down there about 6 miles from here. Okay, so that's what we've been doing to get ready for this. Just to give you some other ideas that, why is this so important? We talked about this already. You've talked about the growth here in this community, but the growth is actually even further south of here now. If you know why that is, because it's where the open land is, and I'll show you a picture of that in just a minute. But if you look at that little diagram there, the point of the pyramid or the triangles is about where we're standing today, and it goes out about 5 miles south here. It's down Woodruff, down Scufftown Road. And you can see that the demographic projections for growth in that area for the next 5 years is huge, both on that side and on the other side of 385. But that's where all the growth is headed. Annual growth rates of 3% at least in population. So, and you know what I'm talking about. If you look out that way, there's also no churches, virtually no churches out that way. There's no Methodist churches out that way. When you drive out there, you find one Presbyterian church. It's relatively sizable, I would call it. Very, very small little churches scattered around, but almost no churches in that area. So this is a big community. It's growing fast and does not have access to worship community like we do here. Okay. That's just a picture. You all know it well. If you go from Five Forks, which is the top of the triangle this time, and you go outward from there, you know where the land is developed, and then you get to about 417 and it stops, and that's where the new growth, that's where the developers are now buying land. The little dot there is Rudolph Gordon. It's about 6 miles from here, a little over at 6.2 miles, I believe. And people say, well, why would we put a church there? It's too close, right? I've heard that a lot. It is too close, right? You know the distance from here to Malden United Methodist? It's about the same. And I don't think anyone would say that we're too close to Malden United Methodist. And thank goodness when they put this ground here, when we brought the ground here, that people didn't say this is too close to the small United Methodist churches that are all sprinkled around here, because some people could have said that if they had not been bold. And like Laura Allen said so well this morning, there are times to be bold, and now is the time to be bold so that we can serve that community out there. Most Advent members live within 2 to 3 miles of this church. Who in here lives beyond 3 miles of the church? Okay, most do not, and that's the diagrams of the GPS of your addresses, plotted, to where the top of the pyramid is again, and most are within about 3 miles, and you can see it spreads out beyond that, but most are within 3 miles. Frankly said, if we're expecting the people that live out there well beyond Five Forks, 6 miles out in those new developing areas and further to come here, it's not going to happen. We can dream. We'd love it to happen. It's not going to happen. We need to be out there in their community to make this happen, because most of you, in fact, are within 3 miles or so of the church. That's the majority are within 3 miles of this church, as the crow flies. So why would we want to do this? I think we've talked about that a lot. It's really part of what we are. It's part of our DNA. Our mission is fishing. It's said often, but I think it's important to say it again, that the last United Methodist Church built in this county is where? It's right here, 31 years ago. Think about how this county has grown in 31 years. I mean, that should hurt us all, that the last time that we were bold enough in this congregation, in this community called the United Methodist Church, to build a church was 31 years ago right here. Started, as we know, in the clubhouse of Heritage Lakes, eventually became the building, the first building, the second building, and now the subsequent buildings. So that's why. Our mission is fishing. In Matthew 8, it says, therefore go. And go is the action verb. We need to go to where we can help people, we can make disciples for Christ, and we can be in community with them as we know. So that's the big why. Our mission is fishing. We have strong DNA, and we're well positioned to make this happen and make it successful. What's going to happen next in the next few months and next quarters into 2020? First of all, we're going to be asking for the approval of the church council in the next weeks to approve this plan going forward, which will include the plan to hire a new associate pastor and name a campus pastor. And that campus pastor is in the room with us today. And Laura Allen is excited having the great opportunity to go forth and build a church up from scratch with our help, with our DNA. And she's very excited about that. And so if we go forth these plans, which we hope will, and we think will be approved, we will get a new associate pastor, and Laura Allen will be our campus pastor as of mid-2019. So that'll be effective mid-2019. In the spring, we're going to expand the multi-site team and bring new people in. So if you're interested, please talk to Laura Allen or myself after this. We'd love to bring new people into the team to start to build this community that's going to build the multi-site going forward. Sometime after Laura Allen's appointed as a campus pastor, we'll start to do regular events from mid-2019 through the early part of 2020, mid-2020, events in the community out there. Like we mentioned, trunk or treat and those kind of things. We need to take these types of events out to the community and others to make that connection, start to build small groups out there and so forth. And our plan is sometime in 2020, we don't have an exact date, sometime in 2020, when we'll know it's right when it's right, is we'll start weekly worship at Rudolph Gordon. So the idea of the worship will be we will film the sermon here in the big sanctuary. We're putting equipment in to do that so we can film it. That will be projected out there, not live, but projected out there. Contemporary music, we'll have a band, we'll have children's worship out there as well, and the youth will continue to worship here for the time being because to keep the synergy going there. So that's what we'll start to do. That's the plan going forward. The how's important also too is because the important thing to understand is how much support we have for this. Because the conference, the state conference, and the Greenville district want this to happen, they're willing to support it financially in a very serious way, to the tune of about $100,000 a year for 4 years. That will pay the majority of our expenses to make this happen. We'll still be accountable for about $50,000 a year, we estimate, to make this a go. And then hopefully, as it grows and giving grows out there as well, it becomes self-sufficient. So it's really important to the district and the conference, and they're willing to put their money behind it, their assets, their treasure, to make this happen. So we're also going to be asking, as time approaches, sometime probably in 2020, we'll be looking for people like you to join us. I'll be joining Laura Allen as we go out there. We'll be looking for seed worshipers, people to go out there and make this a success at first. And I'll always remember the story of Carol, I believe her name was. I think it was Carol, at St. Andrews by the Sea. An elderly lady who had gone to Hilton Head United Methodist Church, St. Andrews, for many years, and begrudgingly started to go to this new satellite church in Bluffton. And she said it was one of the richest blessings of her life. So if you're willing to be a pioneer, to be that missionary, to go forward and take Advent's DNA and make disciples for Christ in a new community, we're going to be looking for people to do that. And kind of commit for about a year. We'd like people to commit for about a first year so that we can make sure it's a success, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Okay? So we have some questions that we think you probably have in mind. I'm just going to kind of put them up here and try to answer some of them. We've probably answered some of them already. But you'll have a chance for questions afterward, like Jim and Gary said. So how will the satellite impact us here on Woodruff Road campus? In fact, very little for quite a while. As I mentioned, we'll have a new associate pastor. Laura Allen will take on the campus pastor role. But in terms of impact here directly, not a lot until 2020. The risks are minimal, we think. Financial risk, there's always some risk there, but the conference and district are contributing so much. We're much more worried about the people treasures, and that's why we're worried about the people side of this. Why this area? I mentioned very clearly the impact of the growth out there, and it's a high impact, high growth area, and there are no real churches out there. Isn't it close? I mentioned the correlation to Malden United Methodist Church. People think it's close, but it's really not as close as you think. And why would we do this when we haven't yet filled up the new sanctuary we're going to have? It's because to fill up the new sanctuary, you got to have leaders, and as we grow these leaders, we'll help fill this new sanctuary. And studies show that when you have people leave to go do this, the seats are filled very quickly by new members who join us, because it'll be so exciting. Will it spread out our staff too thin? No, because we're taking care of that in the long-range staffing plan to be sure we have adequate staffing for that and for this. We will have a campus pastor, a part-time music director or worship director, as well as a part-time children's person when the time is right, to make sure that we don't spread it too thin. How are we going to pay for it? I mentioned the support from the district and from the conference. And then, what will be the impact of asking people to go away? Not much. We think the seats will fill in quickly, and this will be a great way, just like there's first leaders at Heritage Lakes, this will be a great way of developing new leaders, because people that go forward in mission like this develop leadership skills that are quite phenomenal and will help us. The worship will look a lot like this campus in terms of the contemporary worship. If you attend the 955, it'll look very similar to that. but the sermon will be video broadcast, like I said. That's our team, as I mentioned earlier, the names. And if you want to join us, then please see me or Laura Allen. We're looking forward to that. And we have plenty of time for questions after this. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim to talk about what else we got planned.
All right, we will have some more questions here. Now, after all the analysis were done, we compiled a lot of this information. We presented it back to Church Council so they could see what all came out of the different SWATs that we did. And after we did that meeting, this Five Forks plan is kind of resonating with a lot of folks. And I had Karen and Maggie Taylor and Lee Randall all came up afterwards and said, you know, we really want to dig in to this 5 miles. What are the needs here? And I'm going to ask Karen Schultz to go over this with you. This is now online. You should have gotten a Realm email. We could not have paid a research group to do a better job. And it was great because they looked at it as what the needs are, what is out there that currently exists, but there weren't a lot of recommendations. And it's important that everybody understands this is going to take a lot of time for us to work through and find out where we can make an impact and do this right. This is some great stuff. So Karen Schultz, would you please come up and...
So my name is Karen, and I worked with the team over the summer to put together the needs assessment. As Jim mentioned, it is available through Realm, or if you're not yet on Realm, call the church office and we can get a copy over to you. It's 61 pages of wonderfulness that you will want to read. But we're just going to hit the highlights today, just to wet your whistle on what's in there. As Jim mentioned, it is just research about the needs right here in this area. There are not recommendations, but there are resources and contact information for when the church decides they want to move on certain topics in there. So let me tell you a little bit about how we put it together, how we did the research, and then we'll go over the key findings together. As Jim mentioned, we really want to focus on identifying the needs right here in our own backyard in this 5-mile radius around the church. So we dug into primary and secondary research. We looked into census information. We looked into reports from organizations. We connected with over 59 organizations that are here serving our 5-mile community. We did that through one-on-one subject matter expert interviews. We hosted several focus groups. We also did a survey and sent that survey out both to church members and to the wider community. Had really great response on the survey, better response than frankly we anticipated. And not only did we get great response to the survey, but the survey respondents were very, very open with us, with 63% answering an open-ended question about their biggest concerns and their biggest needs. So we heard a lot from the people in the community about what was on their mind specifically. So the structure of the report, as you look through it, you'll see different topics, different communities of people listed, and we kind of took each of those topics or communities and said, okay, how prevalent, how relevant is that to our community here? What are the overviews, the key findings for that topic or that community? And then a list of resources and contacts for each, so that if we decide to move forward with any of that, we have access to the folks that we talk to be able to do that. So demographically, I think we all know that this area, typically higher income, higher education, higher home costs, very, very family focused, very fast growing area, a lot of elderly family members living with folks in this community. So we looked at demographics of the entire 5 miles. We looked at demographics of Simpsonville 29681, which makes up the majority of those 5 miles. And then we looked at the statistics for just Five Forks, the little triangle of Five Forks, because quite honestly, those Five Forks statistics throw them all off a little bit. So we broke them all out, and you can see that in the report. Okay, so here are some of the key findings. The primary area of concern for folks that responded to the survey, they said they're 84.2% frequently or always were concerned about financial stress. We're stressed about finances and financial management. Coming in second, 80.3% of respondents to the survey said that their biggest area of concern was managing a really busy family schedule. And the third greatest area of concern, as you can see up there, was loneliness and depression, with almost 68% answering that they often or always felt lonely or depressed. So, and as I mentioned, there were 63% of folks who responded to the open-ended questions. Those are all listed in the report word for word, so you can see some of the color and nuance around some of the concerns of community members. Okay, so underserved communities. When we looked at the groups of people right here in our 5-mile radius that were not very well served or had opportunities where we can really kind of fill the gap, we found that seniors is one of those areas. We have over 13,500 folks that are 55 and older, over 7,000 folks that are 65 and older right here in this little area of town. And some of the biggest needs that we uncovered for our elder population, seniors, housing maintenance and food, things like helping with changing smoke detectors or fixing up front porches or putting in wheelchair ramps or those sorts of things, you know, just a little maintenance around the house, and food concerns. And we are starting a Meals on Wheels route, so if anyone wants to be a part of that. Secondly, helping with personal business. We found that oftentimes seniors have a really hard time determining if an email was a phishing scheme or a phone call was a phishing scheme. They sometimes had the resources to hire a contractor but had no idea how to go about finding the right contractor and vetting them. So some of those kind of personal business type things. And then combating loneliness and adding value in their season of life. So those were some of the concerns and things that we could really kind of fill the gap on when it comes to seniors. Secondarily, military is another area that we have a little bit of gap here in our 5-mile radius. We have over 1,300 veterans right here on the 5-mile radius, and we have almost 200 active duty members just right here. And as you can imagine, their needs are very, very different. When it comes to the veterans, we discovered that there were a lot of physical needs, again, similar to what we saw with the elderly population, things like needing wheelchair ramps or handholds in the home, minor maintenance, and those sorts of things. And then loneliness. We saw that there are some programs in the area that are come and discuss or come and talk about a certain issue, but they're really looking for come and socialize with other folks of similar interests and just hang out and have coffee and donuts. So really loneliness is an issue for veterans in our area. For active duty, very, very different needs. We saw that families really needed the support when deployed, when the military members are deployed. So things like mowing lawns and helping with children and things around the house. I mean, just think about all the things that you share with the folks in your home. So being able to provide some of that need. And then when families are about to separate or about to reintegrate, that's a really delicate time for families. And so to provide an opportunity for them to be together in a safe place and have some fun and reintegrate as a family unit when they come back from deployment, or to provide some memories and opportunity to take those memories with them in separate directions just before deployment. And then we uncovered a handful of social service needs. Mental health stood out as one of the most prevalent needs in our area. In 2017, there were 421 ER visits and 1,500 inpatient discharges for mental illness just right here in our 5-mile radius. 44 million Americans suffer from mental illness, and South Carolina ranks 50th in access to care for mental illness. We only have 54 psychiatrists in Greenville County, which is a really low number. So a lot of work to do there. Secondarily, we saw that domestic violence popped up as an issue. In 2017, 57 people from Five Forks, from our neighborhood in Five Forks, received services from Safe Harbor, which is the premier domestic violence prevention and awareness agency for the upstate. And Safe Harbor estimates that for every person who called for help in some way, shape, or form, there were approximately 50 that didn't. So there are a lot of folks in this area. In South Carolina, the hotline for domestic violence receives 21,000 calls per day. And ladies, if you have been in the restrooms here in the church, you've seen the safe harbor signs, and we are constantly replacing those. And those pull tabs with the numbers at the bottom are often pulled. So just anecdotally, we definitely see that happening. And then lastly, on the social service needs side of things, surprised us a little bit, human trafficking bubbled up as a growing issue in this area. So in 2016, there were 78 reported cases of human trafficking in Greenville County, not just in our neck of the woods here, but in Greenville County. In the years between 2012 and 2016, there was a 26% increase in hotline calls, 152% increase in cases reported, and get this, a 229% increase in 911 calls about human trafficking. So you might be thinking to yourself, why would that be going on right here? Well, it's because Greenville is right here in the I-85 corridor, right between Atlanta and Charlotte, who are repeatedly year after year ranked in the top 10 cities in the nation for human trafficking. So we see a lot of that crossroads, but we did see some homegrown human trafficking right here. So it wasn't just that pass through, particularly right at that I-85 intersection in Pelham Road. So those are just a few of the highlights. There is so much more information in the report. As Jim mentioned, we'll be looking at this report for a long time to come. As we mentioned, the report is just the needs. Now it's our responsibility to take that, let it simmer, let it percolate, and decide what we as a congregation can do for these audiences, for some of these needs, and how we can fill the gap.
We've presented pieces of this along the way to church council, and church council is much more vocal than y'all are, and there was all kinds of concerns and questions, and there was one moment in our recent presentation when we had everything wrapped up, and it was pretty much exactly what you saw tonight. And someone, Rob Jones actually, we were talking about how this seems a little scary. This is going out and doing something that's unknown. And some of you may know Rob Jones, and he raised his hand and said, I'm going to guess that 31 years ago, in a Heritage Lakes clubhouse, those 17 people were a little nervous too. And yet, you see what God has done through their faithfulness and through their willingness to step out in faith. And the funny thing about God is we don't always see, He doesn't always give us the opportunity to see all the steps out in front of us. We can just see the next one, and we've got to be faithful to take that one before the next one is revealed to us. So there's a lot of unknown about what we're talking about. We've done a lot of research. Karen and Dave's group, we've done a lot of study. But some of it is you just got to jump out there and try it. And the thing I love about the satellite idea is that it really is just like another mission trip. It's the biggest one we've ever taken. It'll be the most sustained mission trip we've ever taken. But that's what it is. And it's exciting to me. After the last church council presentation where we saw all this and we had the opportunity to react and raise questions and concerns, they saved me for last. And I said, it's kind of my role to say spiritual things. And the Spirit was revealing to me in that moment that if we could possibly accomplish a dream on our own, then we're dreaming too small. If our dreams are so small that we don't need God to accomplish them, then shame on us. But if we are faithful and we have the fearless confidence that Pastor Laura Allen preached about this morning, then it's going to take the miraculous power of God. And I believe that God has done amazing things through this congregation in the past, and God will continue to do amazing things through this congregation in the future. And I can't wait to see what that looks like. I'm so proud to be one of your pastors and be on this fun ride, and it's going to be fun. So, was it Norm, I think, to your point, spread the word. Tell people to come out to that next town hall. We are going to put it on YouTube. We're going to try to communicate it as far and wide as we possibly can, but we want to get this word out, and you can help in doing that. But let's pray together. Gracious God, we thank you for the people of our past, the faithful members of Advent from all the way back 31 years ago, who, despite any kind of anxiety or fear that they might have had, we're faithful to you and faithful to your calling to make disciples of Jesus Christ in this area when there really weren't very many things in this area except cow pastures. We're grateful for the ways in which you have blessed their work and their faithfulness. And we pray that as we prepare to take a step into the future, and we prepare to be obedient to what we think you are calling us to, we pray that you'd pour your blessings on us. Give us that fearless confidence. Give us the power of your Holy Spirit. And bless our efforts to make disciples of your Son, Jesus Christ, for the transformation of the world. It's in His name that we pray. Amen.